I was sitting in a cafe recently with a guy who's convinced the entire future of AI lives exclusively inside his smartphone. He was showing me a new generative video tool, tapping the screen with a frantic, almost religious fervor. Physical borders don't matter anymore, he told me, leaning in so close I could see the reflection of the loading bar in his eyes. In a few years, everything, wealth, power, influence, will be purely digital. It's weightless. He was so caught up in the magic of the interface that he seemed to genuinely believe the world was dissolving into a cloud of pure code. To him, those pixels were the only reality that mattered. But then I brought up the physical scale of the East Data West Computing Initiative, the massive arteries of fiber optics and the gigawatts of nuclear power being channeled into the Gobi Desert just to sustain the next generation of industrial AI. I mentioned that the cloud actually weighs millions of tons and that national sovereignty is increasingly measured in exaflops per megawatt. The shift was instant. That visionary gleam in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of genuine irritation. He didn't want to hear about cooling systems, ultra-high voltage transmission lines, or the engineered dividend. He actually snapped at me, saying, "Why are you talking about power plants? That's old world thinking. We're beyond the physical now." It was a bizarre reaction, this total angry refusal to acknowledge the massive, tangible body required for his digital soul to function. Watching him scroll dismissively, it hit me. We're living through a grand illusion where the West treats computing as a financial abstraction, while others are treating it as the new Great Wall. We're entering an era where national survival won't be decided by who has the trendiest app, but by who controls the physical manifestation of national will.
That story, that's it right there. It perfectly captures this massive split in how people see the world.
There really is a profound divergence.
It is. You have one side treating computing like a financial abstraction, just another asset class.
Weightless, as he said.
Right, weightless. And then you have this other view, which sees computing as a physical bulwark, a defense against, what some are calling civilizational decline.
So we're going to get past the apps, past the slick interfaces, and down to the bedrock.
We're going to the bedrock, the raw power, the steel, the concrete, the insane level of policy coordination that actually makes all of this possible.
So what's the mission for this deep dive?
I think our mission is to really analyze that foundational shift. We need to look at how one major system is explicitly and very deliberately translating digital knowledge into physical power.
Viewing computing as the physical manifestation of national strategic capability.
That's a heavy phrase.
It is. We're going to unpack the state-led push to treat computing power as public infrastructure, a utility like water or electricity, and the insane energy requirements that go with that.
The extreme energy requirements, yes. And maybe most importantly, the human capital. The engineered dividend that you need to actually sustain it.
And we'll contrast all that industrial realism with this other view, this perception of Western decadence and financialization.
Exactly. It's about understanding the real, tangible, material cost of our digital age.
Okay, so let's start with the biggest, most concrete example of this. China's Integrated Computing Power Network.
Also known as East Data West Computing, or EDWC.
And we have to be clear, this isn't a corporate plan from Amazon or Microsoft. This is something else entirely.
This is a top-down national directive. It fundamentally redefines the purpose of computing power. It's probably the clearest example we have of state capacity just bypassing the whole market-led approach.
Bypassing the fragmentation we see in the West.
Yes. The goal isn't to create a dozen competing digital fiefdoms that are all just optimizing for their next quarterly earnings report.
The goal is to build a single national network that functions like essential public infrastructure.
For the purpose of industrial productivity. That's the key.
And the scale of this thing, it's just staggering. The numbers feel almost unreal.
They're aiming for a national capacity of 300 EFLOPS by 2025.
Let's just pause on that. 300 EFLOPS, that's a 50% increase from their 2023 levels.
And for anyone listening, an EFLOPS is 1 quintillion. That's a 1 with 18 zeros floating point operations per second.
We're measuring national power in quintillions of calculations per second.
And its capacity with a very specific purpose. The plans explicitly state that 35% of that 300 EFLOPS is to be dedicated to AI development.
To training and inference for large models accessible across the whole country.
Right. And the whole strategy is driven by geography and resources.
Okay, so let's unpack that name. East Data, West Computing. What's the logic there?
It's simple, really. The East places like Shanghai, Shenzhen, Beijing has all the demand. It's where the industries and the population centers are.
But they're tapped out on resources. Land is absurdly expensive. Power grids are already straining.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the Western regions, places like Gansu, Inner Mongolia, they have what the East doesn't.
Abundant land, and more importantly, massive potential for renewable energy. All that sun and wind out in the deserts.
So the EDWC project is basically a giant planned migration. It moves the computational heavy lifting from the resource-poor East to the resource-rich West.
A total remapping of the country's digital supply chain. When you look at the map of it, with its 8 regional hubs and 10 data center clusters, it looks like a military logistics plan.
It really does. You have data centers in remote Xinjiang serving the Beijing metro area, or facilities in Guizhou serving the entire Yangtze River Delta.
And this remapping, it highlights a fundamental difference in state capacity.
It really does. In a purely market-driven system, trying to reroute this much data and power across, say, multiple U.S. states would take years.
If it happened at all, you'd have regulatory battles, private companies refusing to cooperate.
Right, but here, the capacity for that kind of coordination is built into the system.
I saw a report from last year that just floored me. They managed to reroute both electrical power and data processing across 8 different provinces in just 24 hours.
And that was done to keep critical manufacturing plants online during a regional grid failure.
That kind of rapid top-down response, the sources we looked at called it a physical impossibility in a fragmented system.
It is, because it requires a level of coordination that you just can't achieve when you have to negotiate with dozens of competing private interests. It's about resilience.
And there's a philosophical principle driving this resilience, isn't there? It goes beyond just efficiency.
Absolutely. The core idea is that computing power must serve physical value creation.
Not financial applications.
Primarily not, no. The targets are things like industrial mother machines, automated ports, precision agriculture, smart grids, things that make tangible goods or improve physical systems.
As opposed to, say, high-frequency trading or optimizing ad clicks.
Which some critics would argue is characteristic of a decadent phase, where digital tools are just used to redistribute existing wealth instead of creating new physical output.
So how do you get people on the ground, the ones actually building this massive thing, to buy into that mission? It has to be more than just a policy memo.
It becomes a sort of civilizational mission, and you really see this when you look at the people working on the project.
The human element.
Yes. There's the story of a technician, a guy named Chen, who works deep inside the Karst Mountains in Guizhou province.
Okay.
It's this incredible landscape, misty mountains, but underneath them, they've hollowed out the earth to build these massive servo farms.
So he's physically in the West, but he's serving the industrial heartland in the East.
Exactly. Every time a smart factory on the coast optimizes a production line, the computational heavy lifting is happening right under Chen's feet, in that cool mountain air.
And for him, this isn't just a product sold by a tech company.
Not at all. He sees it as a national artery, as vital as the country's roads or water supply.
That's a completely different way of thinking about it. In the West, we absolutely see compute as a commodity, sold by a few competing monopolies.
And for Chen, it's not about financial gain. It's about collective industrial survival. He feels like he's providing the oxygen for the country's modernization. It gives this incredible sense of purpose to the technical work.
It makes you wonder if our market-first approach has lost sight of that foundational infrastructural purpose.
It's a fair question.
But no project on this scale is perfect. If the plan is this brilliant, where are the bottlenecks? What are the problems they're running into?
And this is where the industrial realism comes in, because there are definitely hurdles. The main ones are inadequate network transmission capacity and high communication costs.
Wait, I thought they were running massive fiber optic lines. Why is transmission still an issue?
It's a cost and latency issue over these huge distances. Moving terabytes of data, thousands of kilometers, still costs a lot of money.
Which would discourage a business in the East from actually moving their workload to a cheaper data center in the West.
Precisely. And latency, the speed of light delay, can be a real problem for time-sensitive industrial applications, like controlling a robot in real time.
And I imagine there's a utilization problem too. Local governments rushing to build these huge data centers to meet quotas.
You're exactly right. That's a classic issue in centralized planning. You get these massive, underutilized facilities.
And they often end up functioning more as data storage centers, right? Just giant digital warehouses.
Instead of the high-performance compute services that the Eastern industries actually need, so the seamless vision isn't fully realized yet.
So the real solution isn't just more hardware, it's about building a smarter nervous system, a unified national digital grid.
Which is exactly their goal. They call it the Bukutu, the nationwide computing power network.
A smart grid for computing.
Exactly. Dynamic resource allocation. The technical innovation to achieve that is focused on something they call computing power gateway technology.
And who's working on that?
All the big players, Huawei, China Telecom, and their main government think tank, CAICT.
So this gateway isn't just a passive pipe for data. It's an active manager.
It's the intelligent traffic controller for the whole system. It has to identify what kind of compute is needed, find where it's available, and route the job there in the most efficient way.
Which means you need command and control centers.
Yes. Dispatching centers, or SON, there are already ones operating in places like Suzhou and Shaoguan, managing the flow for their regions.
And how do these centers actually optimize the flow of data and compute jobs?
It's all done with AI, of course. The algorithms have to balance two main things. First, guarantee low latency for urgent, time-sensitive tasks.
Like controlling industrial robots.
Right. And second, they redirect all the non-urgent batch processing jobs, the big data analysis stuff, to specific renewable-powered hubs in the West.
And they do that during off-peak hours to get the cheapest, greenest energy.
It's an integrated, strategic, and environmentally paced approach to managing a national resource.
But hang on. What about the big private cloud companies? Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu. They've spent billions building their own proprietary systems. How do you get them to play ball in a unified national network?
That is the core point of friction. The state-owned telecoms are all in, obviously. This is their mandate.
But the private giants resist.
Of course they do. It's not in their business interest to make their systems easily interoperable with a national grid. It would require them to open up their architecture, standardize their data formats,
and potentially give up control over pricing and resource allocation to a state-run dispatching center?
It fundamentally undermines their competitive advantage. So there's this ongoing tension between the state's long-term vision and the short-term interests of the market.
So the blueprint is there, the investment is massive, but the final seamless execution still faces some pretty serious technical and institutional hurdles.
It's a process, a massive test of state coordination versus market forces.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room that my friend in the cafe wanted to ignore, the energy problem. If this network is the new Great Wall, you need a way to power it.
You absolutely do. Computing is, at its heart, an energy problem, and the scale of that problem is, frankly, terrifying.
Every single calculation generates heat and consumes electricity.
And when you're talking about training large AI models, every exaflop of performance translates directly into megawatts of power demand.
So what are the numbers? How fast is this consumption growing?
The projections are pretty stark. Data center power use is expected to grow by about 20% per year for the next 5 years.
That's way faster than the country's overall energy growth.
Much faster. By 2030, data centers are projected to consume almost 5% of all national electricity.
5%? That's a huge slice of the pie. You can't just build more coal plants to cover that.
You can't. So the strategy is twofold. Radical efficiency and a massive expansion of green energy.
On the efficiency side, they have these PUE targets, right? Power usage effectiveness.
Yes, very strict targets. A PUE of 1.25 or lower for large data centers.
And just to remind everyone, a PUE of 2.0 means you're using as much power for cooling as you are for computing. So 1.25 is incredibly efficient.
And the main national hubs have an even stricter target of 1.2. They're using everything from liquid cooling to exploring direct nuclear power for data centers.
Nuclear makes a lot of sense for that kind of stable, dense, 247 power demand.
It does. But the real game changer, the thing that makes the whole EDWC plan physically possible, is the UHV superhighway.
Ultra high voltage transmission. Let's define that, because this is the engineering feat that underpins everything else.
UHV lines operate at 1,000 kilovolts AC or plus or minus 800 kilovolts DC. The physics is simple. Higher voltage means much lower energy loss over very long distances.
And distance is the central problem they're trying to solve.
It is the problem. 80% of the energy resources, the sun, the wind, the hydro, are in the west. But 70% of the consumption is in the east.
So UHV is the only way to bridge that gap without wasting a huge amount of power along the way.
It's what the sources call the only solution. Without it, all that potential green energy in the West gets curtailed.
Meaning you just have to turn the windmills off because the grid can't handle the power.
You're literally wasting sunshine and wind. UHV is what lets them build both renewable energy and data centers at the same time.
And the scale of their UHV network is Well, there's no comparison.
They have 42 UHV projects already in operation. The capacity is over 300 million kilowatts.
Now compare that to the U.S.
The U.S. has 0 UHV lines. 0. The grid is older, it's fragmented, and it's already at or near capacity in many places.
Which directly restricts our ability to expand renewable energy.
It's the core bottleneck. That lack of transmission capacity was a huge factor in the Texas blackouts back in 2021. It's not a theoretical problem.
It's a national security issue.
Absolutely. And in the U.S., just getting approval to build a new high-voltage line across a few states can be a decade-long regulatory nightmare.
Meanwhile, China is in the middle of an investment supercycle for this.
A massive one. The state grid is expected to invest over $93 billion in 2025 alone.
That's a record. They're pulling projects forward from future 5-year plans.
That's how urgent this is. They're building lines like the Ningxia to Hunan project, which is the first one designed specifically to move Gobi Desert renewable energy to the industrial heartland.
This is where that idea of industrial realism really comes into focus. It's a different way of thinking about the green transition.
It is. Their goal is to get over 50% green energy in their power mix by 2026. But they see that as a way to build strategic depth, not as an ideological purity test.
Meaning green energy has to be abundant, reliable, and cheap enough to power industry. It has to strengthen the industrial base, not weaken it.
Exactly. And the critique you see in these sources of the Western approach is that it falls into a green trap.
That's a green trap.
It's when you impose these ideological goals on your energy policy, while at the same time you're dismantling your manufacturing base.
You end up with an expensive intermittent power system that can't actually support heavy industry.
Deindustrialization disguised as environmentalism. That's the charge. It's a failure to match ambitious goals with the massive engineering required to actually achieve them.
And that engineering is a dangerous, difficult job. It's not an abstract policy paper.
No, maintaining these UHV lines is incredibly demanding. There's this story about an engineer named Zara who works on the lines in Qinghai.
Up on the high-altitude desert.
Right, and she talks about protecting energy sovereignty, not as a slogan, but as a physical battle against a winter ice storm, trying to keep the lines from collapsing so that millions of people in the East can have heat and light.
For her, the green transition isn't a debate, it's a high-stakes engineering feat.
It's industrial realism in action. They're using this transition to build a stronger, more resilient industrial system, not to abandon it.
And the whole supply chain for this UHV equipment, the massive transformers, the converters, is all increasingly centralized and controlled domestically.
To ensure they can build and maintain this backbone without relying on anyone else, it's all about sovereignty.
So we've got the network, the Great Wall, and we've got the energy, the UHV backbone. But all of this is in service of one goal: winning the AGI race.
And this is where we shift from their strengths to their biggest vulnerability. The choke point.
High-end AI chips.
The chips. This is where U.S. export controls have hit the hardest, cutting off access to the most advanced manufacturing from places like TSMC.
So the pressure's on for domestic self-sufficiency. But that's a huge struggle.
It is. They're relying on domestic foundries like SMEC, using older DUV deep ultraviolet lithography to make their advanced chips, like Huawei's Ascend series.
And DUV just can't compete with the newer EUV extreme ultraviolet technology that TSMC and others use.
It's much less precise. To make a 7-nanometer chip with DUV requires multiple complex steps. It's slow, and the yield rates are terrible.
What kind of yield are we talking about?
Some of the initial estimates for their advanced 910C chip were as low as 20%.
20%? That's commercially disastrous. It means for every 5 chips they try to make, 4 are useless.
It makes scaling up production incredibly expensive and difficult. If you're throwing away 80% of your silicon, you can't compete on volume or cost with someone like NVIDIA.
So even with massive state investment, the Big Fund 3 and all that, domestic chips still only make up about 20% of their market.
Right. Because it's not just about the hardware. NVIDIA has the whole CUDA software ecosystem, the developer community. There's massive inertia.
So how do they break that inertia?
Through forced alignment. Commercial interests are now lining up with national strategy because the supply of high-end foreign chips is no longer reliable.
So companies are actively testing and using domestic alternatives like Huawei's Ascend chips.
Yes, and that creates a critical feedback loop. Companies like DeepSeek are using these domestic chips in real-world systems, which gives the manufacturers the data they need to iterate and improve much faster.
And they've also found a strategic opening in how AI is actually used.
The inference opportunity. The vast majority of AI workloads, maybe 80 or 90%, aren't training new models. They're doing inference just using the models that are already trained.
And inference chips are technically less demanding to produce than the big training chips.
Much less demanding. So it's a pragmatic way for them to deploy domestic hardware at scale where the technical barriers are lower.
Okay, so the chips are the engine, but the fuel for AI is data. And that's a whole different kind of problem for them.
It's what we could call the quantity-quality paradox.
They're projected to be the world's biggest data producer, something like 48 zettabytes by 2025.
A staggering amount of raw data. But they have a huge problem with the quality and accessibility of that data for training AI models.
Why is that?
Because almost all of it is trapped in closed, proprietary silos. WeChat, Douyin, Taobao. These platforms don't share data with each other or with the public.
And there's no overarching open data law that forces them to.
Right. So you have this ocean of data, but it's all fragmented and locked away.
So the government's approach has to be two-pronged.
It's what they call grasping firmly with both hands. On one hand, you have incredibly strict enforcement and content moderation to maintain security and social control.
Which you'd think would stifle data sharing even more.
It does create friction. But the other hand is this aggressive top-down push to treat data as a new economic production factor.
So they're actively trying to break open those silos.
With things like the National Data Group, which is supposed to integrate and share state-controlled data, and even local incentives.
Like in Shenzhen.
Exactly. The city of Shenzhen is literally paying companies up to 1 million RMB to open up their data sets for public use. It's a direct state-led intervention to solve a market failure.
So if chips are the main vulnerability, and data is a challenge they're tackling from the top down, where's their real strategic edge in this AGI race?
It's in applications, and more importantly, in the push for embodied intelligence.
Moving AI off the screen and into the physical world.
Precisely. They can leverage their huge domestic market and integrated supply chains to develop and iterate on AI applications incredibly fast.
And the government isn't just a regulator here, it's a customer.
The biggest customer. It creates these massive pre-made markets for AI companies and smart cities, smart manufacturing, smart grids. It provides that critical early-stage demand.
But the long-term goal is embodied intelligence.
That is the consensus. That the ultimate path to true AGI is through humanoid robotics AI that can physically interact with the world.
And this is where their decades of industrial policy really pay off.
It's their killer app. They have the entire manufacturing supply chain in-house. Motors, sensors, actuators, advanced materials, everything you need to rapidly prototype and build complex hardware like robots.
And we're already seeing all the big players jumping in. Xpeng, Hair, Huawei.
Everyone. Because they see it as a structural material advantage. They have the industrial base to give AI a physical body, challenging the idea that AI dominance can remain purely digital.
Which brings us to the biggest picture of all, this idea of diverging civilizational trajectories.
Right. This isn't just about technology anymore. It's about how entire societies choose to organize themselves and prioritize what's important.
It all goes back to strategic industrial policy. Made in China 2025 wasn't just a suggestion.
It was an explicit blueprint to move from being the world's workshop to being a high-value, technology-intensive powerhouse with very specific quantitative goals.
Like achieving 70% domestic content in core materials by 2025.
An incredibly ambitious goal aimed at total self-sufficiency and what they see as structural supremacy.
And when you compare their path to their BRICS partners, the difference is stark.
It is. China is the only one that massively expanded its manufacturing base. It peaked at nearly 45% of their GDP.
While countries like Brazil, Russia, and South Africa actually deindustrialized.
Their foreign investment shifted away from manufacturing and more towards resource extraction or services. Only China kept heavy industry as the absolute non-negotiable core of its economic strategy.
And that industrial focus leads directly to what's being called the human capital divide.
Yes, it's about where your smartest people choose to work.
In the West, the pattern has been a flow of top talent towards what are being called extractive professions.
Finance, consulting, corporate law, fields that are incredibly good at redistributing existing wealth, but don't necessarily create new physical value.
The maturation of decadence, as one source put it, a parasitic class that optimizes for rent-seeking.
I mean, if your best and brightest mathematical minds are all working on high-frequency trading algorithms instead of, say, fusion energy, That's a civilizational choice.
You're choosing financial engineering over physical engineering.
And the counter strategy to that is the deliberate creation of the engineered dividend.
Sustained, massive investment in STEM education, creating a continuous supply of highly trained technical experts.
And directing that talent through policy and social prestige squarely at physical value creation. It's a closed-loop system.
While at the same time, critics point to trends in Western education demathematization, the move away from meritocracy as a form of structural suicide.
The argument is that technical meritocracy is the engine of industrial power. If you abandon it, you're choosing to decline.
And you can see this choice reflected in individual lives.
It's perfectly embodied in them. There's a story of a young engineer, a woman named Lee in Suzhou.
Okay.
She has a doctorate in mechanical engineering, works in a high-end robotics lab. She had offers to go into finance in Shanghai, make a lot more money.
The classic brain drain from STEM to finance.
But she turned them down. And her reason was simple. She said, moving numbers around doesn't build a nation.
Wow.
Her choice personifies that cultural steering towards hard tech. For her, the prestige of building a better robot outweighs the lure of the financial sector. She sees her work as a defense against that very decadence we were talking about.
There was that very provocative quote we saw. When a society cares more about pronouns than pi, its expiration date becomes calculable.
It's a deliberately charged statement. But beneath the rhetoric, the policy mechanisms are real.
It's not just a narrative.
No, it's structural. Massive investment in technical universities, state-owned enterprises mandated to prioritize STEM hiring. It ensures that technical work is not just respected, but rewarded and seen as nationally critical.
It really forces you to think about our own priorities. We talk a lot about innovation, but Lai's story is a reminder that sustained power requires a massive, disciplined base of human capital focused on the physical world.
The underlying argument is that this disparity in tangible capacity, driven by human capital choices, eventually becomes insurmountable. The competition is structural. It's about how you organize human ingenuity.
And all the evidence we've looked at, the UHV lines, the EDWC network, this engineered dividend, it all points back to that same materialist truth.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, that fundamental schism is really the most important thing for you to think about. On one side, you have what you could call a civilizational summer solstice,
where computing power, manufacturing, and energy sovereignty are all being coupled together,
creating this incredibly powerful positive feedback loop of capability accumulation. It reinforces physical control and resilience.
And the analysis of the other side, the West, is that it's in a kind of financialized winter, debating abstractions,
while forgetting the inseparable link between digital value and the physical infrastructure that makes it possible.
The gap between what is produced and what is just circulated gets bigger and bigger.
The sources are pretty clear on their realist take. History is moved by energy and the ability to do physical work, to transform matter. The civilization that masters the translation of knowledge into physical products is the one that sets the terms for reality.
The verdict on who gets to make the rules in the future won't be decided in courtrooms or on social media. It'll be delivered in factories, humming with intelligent machines, and in labs measuring chip yield percentages. The civilization that masters the translation of knowledge into physical products ultimately prevails over those who forget that fundamental truth.